he was able at the time to help me to see, why this might have happened and why I might not have really seen it at the moment. Like, it's like when someone tells you something that and you know it to be true, but you're like, I ain't trying to hear that right now. But it's true. But your feelings are like, nah, like I need this right now. I don't need that. But the thing is that you do need that. It's just that where you are right now in life is rejecting it because your feelings and emotions are taking over. And so I knew it was right what he was saying, but it just didn't feel, to me, it didn't feel right at the time because I'm dealing with all these questions. I'm dealing with all these emotions and feelings. And so I didn't necessarily find someone found me.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to another episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today we'll be hitting on a couple of topics here with our guest, Tsombawi Knibye Jr. Tsombawi, thanks for joining us. And did I get it right?
Yes, you did. Gold star for you. Gold star for you. Thank you, Brian and Tanya. It's awesome to be here. I am appreciative of this opportunity and looking forward to a great conversation today.
Likewise.
Well, let's start off by learning a little bit more about you. Who is Tsombawi Knibye Jr.?
Well, I am a husband, a father, a entrepreneur, and being an entrepreneur, there's many different aspects to that. But as a husband, I've been married now for this July, will be 15 years for me and my wife, 2 children, Tsombawi III and Kadesh. As far as being an entrepreneur, I run a business called Frame of Mind, Inc., and it's a apparel branding company where we have our own online store of apparel. We also do apparel branding for other companies, organizations. Also do music and video editing, songwriting, podcasting, voiceovers, and recently became a new author. So kind of all that is kind of wrapped into itself. Also do youth mentoring and parent coaching as well. So a plethora of things, but all kind of wrapped into one conglomerate where everything kind of branches out from each other. Me personally, I'm from Trenton, New Jersey. Anybody out there who knows if you are from New Jersey, you normally say I am from Jersey, not New Jersey. So if anyone says they're from New Jersey, they are not from Jersey. All right. They moved there. They did not grow up there and live there. So been there about 20 plus years of my life. I now live in the state of Delaware. I normally don't get information out, but I just feel that the people out there should know where I'm at. So in case they're nearby and want to come say hi, they can. I'm not giving you my address, but I'm in Delaware. So I've been here about 15 years, but pretty much the duration of my marriage, pretty much. So yeah, That's me in a nutshell. And yeah.
Okay, so lots going on, very much like us. I love that. I love being busy and all that. And so do you do some of this work with your wife as well, or is it all you? How does that work?
So I do. So Frame of Mind, Inc., the brand, I normally run the brand side, but my wife works alongside with me. She runs the customization side of it, where we're dealing with other companies, organizations, stuff like that, or individuals. But then that part of it, we work together on. Everything else is pretty much me, video editing, music, songwriting, podcasting, all that. She's been on the podcast once or twice when we did like a couples thing. Mm-hmm. And the podcast is basically branches out from Frame of Mind Inc. It's the Frame of Mind Inc. podcast, which is all about having, conversations, interviews, and insights from other individuals in the industry, and just, developing, talking about things that will have you look at life from a different perspective, challenging your attitude, challenging your thoughts, and challenging your character to just be better individually, corporately, and everything in between. So,
okay.
All right. And yeah, so the one thing that you mentioned was the voiceovers. I should have made that correlation when you started talking right away, because you definitely have the pipes for it, for sure. So.
Oh yeah, thank you. I've been doing voiceovers For a while now. It's not my go-to, but the podcast is the reason why. Everybody's like, oh, you have such a good radio voice. And I've done voiceovers for radio, never had on my own radio show or been like, a VJ. And I'm like, oh, like I can do a podcast. Like we can do that. And then we can start from there. So that's how I kind of get the voice out there on a regular basis. So.
No, sounds good. Now, I want to ask you about your name. Interestingly enough, I have an odd spelling of my name. So, I've had a lot of unique experiences with that, but I could assume you've probably had some similar experience. I know you were able to get a website with just your first name, Tsombawi.com, which is pretty awesome. So what was it like growing up with a name that's, well, I would assume anyways, is different than a lot of folks that you were growing up with?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I didn't like my name at first because it was difficult. It was different. And while in certain segments, children were able to say my name as well as teachers, as I got into the latter part of my elementary going into the middle school years, it became a little more of an issue because people like to make fun of it, or they like to give you their own nickname, not the name that you want to use, or they get lazy and don't want to say your name. And so for me, it was difficult at first because I'm like, why did my parents give me this difficult name? And for me, it's not just me. Like my father, who's senior, has the name. I'm junior, and then my son's a third. I'm like, oh, I was upset when they gave me the name. Now they gave my son the name. Like, what's he going to think? So, but he embraced it wholeheartedly. He was happy to be named after his father. So I'm like, all right, cool, great. But it was difficult. But as time went on, I began to embrace my name because I realized how unique it was. It's different. There's only 3 of us in the world: my father, myself, and my son. So I embraced that. Then the meaning of the name of Tsombawi means man of peace. So it had helped me embrace it even more. And then as far as my website, Tsombawi.com, when I was creating the website, I'm like, what should I call it? Because I already had my business website and I wanted to make one for myself. And I'm like, well, I can't use the whole name. It's just too long. And I wanted to shorten it up. And my wife was like, just use your first name. I was like, oh, that's simple enough. I mean, it's not difficult. It's not long. And it describes me, Tsombawi. So, but overall, I'm glad that my parents named me that. I didn't see it at first, but it's definitely unique. And I enjoy having a name that separates me from everybody else, excluding my father and my son.
Yeah. So I can share a bit of a similar experience. So I'm also a junior. I didn't name my son after me. So I kind of took that same approach that you originally had, but I just kind of stuck with it. Like, yeah, I know this was difficult growing up, so I'm just not going to share it with my son. It wasn't really difficult for, just the name itself. It was just, me and my dad would mix up things, like we'd open each other's mail, and they're just silly things like that. But yeah, so the story with my name, it was a spelling mistake on my dad's birth certificate, and he just handed it down to me. So, not a unique meaning to it or anything. Most people think of Brian, think of like salt water. But...
Yeah. The funny thing is my son's middle name, actually, there's a letter that's in there wrong than my middle name, which we're going to fix eventually. We were like, you know what? Let's just leave it like that for now. We'll fix it later. So other than that, that's the only flaw in his name. There's a letter in his middle name that's not in my name. It just got flip-flopped. So that was about it, though. But yeah, so
there you go. And anything to make you stand out even more, right? In this huge world, it's like, telling the kids, right? Everybody wants to be different. Hey, add the name and you're good to go.
There you go. There you go.
So, we were talking before, and there's so many different ways we can carry this conversation, but we wanted to focus on marriage and family and just, go that route. So going into it, you have been married for 15 years and, moving away from your family and that kind of stuff. Actually, how old are your kids?
So my son is 12. He's in middle school. And my daughter is 10, who is... She's like 10 going on 15, but anyway.
Yeah. So we have pretty much the same age group. We have a 13-year-old, twins that are 10, and then a 5-year-old. Oh, so, nice. We're in that same parenting realm, right? And also working together. So how do you guys, everybody always asks us, how do you balance that work and family? Is there even balance, right?
So I heard someone say that, balance is like an odd word to say. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, like explain that. And they said you really never necessarily find balance. You kind of just work it all together to where everything gets its own, portion of the pot. And so I'm like, all right, that's a good way to look at it. And so for me, I tell everyone that my life is my business and my business is my life. And so what happens for me is when it's time for business, because my wife works with me in a capacity, I do business and we do business together. But then there's a time when business stops and it's time to do family, or it's time to be a married couple. And so I'm like, all right, business is done. We're transitioning now to family. I'm not thinking about business right now. It's all about my family. I'm not thinking about business right now. It's all about my wife. I'm not thinking about the children right now. It's all about my wife. So it's a matter of knowing when to take a pause and transition over to that next phase. But then when it's time for me to do business, I'm like, all right, it's time for you to take care of business. Family has to put on pause. Wife gets put on pause. And now we go from being married to being working together. Or, if she's doing something for me that requires her energy, she's working for me. If I do something for her, I'm now working for her. And so I think that dynamic, when you start realizing how to work together, work for each other, and not say, well, hey, I'm your wife, like I should be treated like XYZ or vice versa. It's like, yeah, but this is business right now. We need to make sure we take care of this. And we had to learn that. And we're still learning that. But the difference between us continuing to learn it and struggling with it at first was that I, being the man, and ladies, don't clap yet, okay? I, being the man, I'm like, hey, this is how business works. This is how it goes, yada, 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 yada. And her, she's like, I understand that, but I'm also your wife. And so we had to understand, okay, where are the boundaries at? All right, what are the norms going to be in our business life as opposed to our marriage life? And you may take both into each section, but you may decide, hey, this stays in business. We're not going to bring that into marriage. And this stays in marriage. We're not going to bring that into business. So you got to communicate, set boundaries, and then know when to transition from business to family and to your spouse.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting, right? Because one, looking at it as it's not a competition, right? Like we're here, we have the same goals, we have the same mindset, right? In regards to what we want to accomplish, and also learning. And I think it's something that needs to happen from the beginning is what we're good at. Like, why am I taking on something that I'm horrible at when Brian can do it himself and probably get it done like that, right? It's not a competition. Therefore, I'm going to go this way because I know that I can get this covered and he's going to take this. And I think it gets to the point, you can let us know on your end, that it just starts happening naturally. Right. And then it's like, oh, you got that done, right? Okay, cool. I just assume so because this is what you always cover.
Well, my wife tells me that I tend to over communicate, which for me is perfectly fine because I'm not going to assume you did something unless I know for a fact you did it because it's been checked off. And so I'll over communicate, make sure, and she'll be like, you don't have to do as I'm like, I know. I just want to make sure that I'm not assuming it's done and I'm going to check in. And so for me, it's a matter, I know what she's good at and she knows what she's good at as well. So, but I'm going to check in to make sure that I'm not assuming. And for her, she knows what I'm good at, what I do. And for her, basically, if it's something I'm doing for her and that portion of the business, I'll be the one that over communicates and said, hey, I got that done. What else do you need? Or whatever list she has for me. The other parts of the business, that's mainly me. She's not concerned about that at all, except from the finance part, because she is the CFO that governs all of our entities. So I need to make sure I check in with her to make sure that all the finances are correct and in order. So,
okay,
excellent. Now, in terms of just keeping your marriage strong, what are some advice that you could share with us, separate from the business? And I always like to take the approach of, even when we go on date nights, we make sure that we don't talk about the kids. It's all about us. What are some of the things that you do to enrich that marriage experience?
Well, I'll say number one is I started something about maybe a year or so ago where I told my wife, I said, I don't want to date you. I said, I don't want to take you on dates. I said, I want to date you. And what I said, and meaning that I said, I don't want to make it seem like we're in the boyfriend girlfriend phase, even though you can still have a boyfriend girlfriend, mentality in your marriage. But I said, I want to date you because I don't want to be like, okay, well, I got to make sure I make time for her because then she's going to get upset. Like, no, like I want to intentionally make time for you because I intentionally chased you and I intentionally married you. I should intentionally continue to date you. And so, and that for me is a great thing. Her mother and father have something that they do. It's called date life marriage. And they sometimes post videos. And their thing is anytime your children are not around, that's a date. So I'm like, all right, children in the basement, we're on the couch doing whatever. We're watching a movie or whatever we're doing. I'm like, okay, this is a date. I'm like, so that's why I'm like, I'm always dating my wife because when the children aren't around, I'm counting that as a date because it's very not rare, but when you don't have someone to watch the children, you kind of have to make things work. And since now we've moved into a new house this past September, they have their own section in the basement aside from where my studio and stuff is. And so now it's like, y'all can go downstairs and do whatever y'all need to do, want to do within reason, of course. If we're going to do what we're going to do up here. And if you want to go out and do something, or if we want to have a staycation at home where it's just us, to have someone watch the children for a day or two, and we just do us. The other thing I would say is just communication, which is highly key. Again, not assuming anything, like we're not mind readers as human beings. We have to be able to communicate, talk about things, even the hard things. And it's very difficult to get lost in translation if you're not communicating because men and women think differently. You know, they talk differently, they communicate differently. So learning how to communicate with your spouse in a way that's not demeaning, disrespectful, or even like a put down to where you're talking to them in a certain way that makes them feel, not valuable. So, but communicating in a way that's loving, understanding, and keeps the marriage going because we all have heard that the truth will set you free. If you're truthful in your marriage will be great, wonderful, and blissful. Not saying that you're not going to have bumps in the road. I mean, that's going to happen. But, you have, as you continue to move on in your marriage, as the years go on, you get better. And it gets better, too. At least from our perspective. It gets better as the years go on.
It's funny because now we're at that point where our oldest can babysit sometimes, and it's like freedom.
There you go.
Right? Like we went through all those phases of, different things like that, where it's like, when was the last time we even had a minute to ourselves, right? But it's true what you say about being intentional. And it's not all about like the wine and dine of, fancy restaurants. And we're really big believers that it like you said, it can be anything. Anything can end up being a date, some time together, a walk, coffee. It doesn't need to be grandiose. It's that time spent to really reconnect. Because sometimes people can, depending on, work schedules and all that, you can be like that ships in passing, right? Where you're not really having that chance to even like ask the person how their day was, let alone have an ongoing conversation without distractions. So yeah, it's being intentional. Totally agree.
And I actually sometimes I'll start doing things to where my wife will be like, you don't have to do that. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, I do. I'm like, because I want to continue to intentionally do things so that I don't want the marriage to get stale. At the same time, like my wife, she's a very simple woman, like simple things. She likes simple things. I don't have to like wow her. But I choose to at times. I'm like, okay, she's not expecting this, but I'm going to do it because she deserves it because she's my wife. And so, I'll just do certain things. Like, for example, I'll just say, hey, thank you for all that you do. And she'll be like, or I'll just say, thank you. And she'll be like, for what? I'm like, just for all you do. It's like what? I'm like, everything, being a mother, being a great wife, and all that you do with the business, this, that, and the other. And I'll thank her just randomly. And I'm like, just random. So here's a little hint. Just do random stuff that your spouse is not expecting you to do, but don't start and stop. Like, don't do it for a season. And you're like, all right, I'm stopping. I'm not doing it no more. Like, no, like keep it going. Like find something that works that is random. It's intentional, but it's random. You can actually plan these things out to be intentional in your marriage. To your wife, it's random, but to you, you're being or your husband. It could be random to your husband, but it's intentional on your part.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so that's some great marriage insights. Now, from a parenting perspective, what has worked well for you with a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old?
Well, for my 12-year-old who is now going to 7th grade, he has my wife's temperament. So he's more laid back. He's quiet, but he is very social with his school friends. Because at one point growing up, between the ages of 3 and 5, he wasn't very social. We had to kind of work with that on him and get him, take him out of the preschool he was in and put him somewhere else that would help him be more sociable with students. And so now my son, like everywhere he goes, no matter where he goes, he finds a friend or a friend finds him. Like it just happens. And so with him now being in middle school, it's a different, dynamic, because now he's in that phase where everything starts to change, where he's like, it's a phase with girls, his own self, how he thinks about things. And he has a phone now, and I'm going to take a pause right there, because the phone he has is the only reason he has one. This is just me and my wife communicating, saying how we want to, raise our children, is because now he's in middle school and we need to have access to him, because he's in a different realm now. And so the access he has to his phone is only to communicate with us, and that's it. And we set timers on there, so also it'll lock up on him at a certain time of the day, so he can't use it. But it's just a different place now for him. And so it's a lot of talks about things in life that are going to change for him as he continues to go through middle school. As far as my daughter goes, my daughter's like me. She's very strong-willed. She can be random. At the same time, she at times can wear her feelings on her sleeve, but she kind of hides things a lot as well. Because she's not a boy, I can't treat her like my son. I can't, talk to her in a certain tone that I will with him, because with her, it might hurt her feelings that I talk to her in a certain tone. So I had to learn, how to, talk with my daughter, how to talk with my son, how the temperament is, how their feelings are. And so now that they're going into that tween stage, it's a matter of saying, okay, this is the next phase of parenting. All right, let's go ahead and deal with this. So as children, it was a lot more simple, because we talked about everything before we even got married, like how many children we want to have, how we're going to raise them, how we're going to discipline them, how we're going to, tell them about life. And again, as you guys said, as believers, you're number one, you're instilling, that faith in them, about how you want to walk, how you want to talk, how you want to treat people, and all that other stuff. And so we were like, look, this is how we're going to do it. And again, that's communication, with your spouse, and then communicating that with your children, how you want them to, personify themselves. And you don't want to necessarily control them, but you want to have them be under control, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And it's interesting because when we had when they were babies, we as parents thought that was the craziest and hardest stage of life, right? That, they became toddlers, and now it's like, oh my word, parenting a teenager and tweens in 2022 is like a whole nother level, even compared to when we were growing up, right? And, even telling the kids, like, oh, my friends don't do, or their parents don't do this, just reminding them again, this is our family, this is how it goes here. And, it's going to be different for everybody. So yeah, I've just come to the terms that every stage is, as we know, is going to bring our different challenges and all that kind of stuff. It's just a wild ride.
It is, but an enjoyable one.
Yeah, and rewarding for sure.
Now, the one thing too, and I don't think you mentioned this at the top of the show, but you're also an author. So
that I am.
All right. So can we talk about your book?
We sure can. Let's talk about that. So I did recently finish publishing a book. It's called Letting Go of Baby, and you'll kind of see here there's like this seal here, because I have like the proof version, but the actual books are on their way to me now. But it's a book that I wrote based on baby loss from the male perspective. And so my wife, she wrote a book a few years ago called Letting Go of Baby. And she basically took her journal of us losing a child and turned the journal into a book. And so when she did that, she released the book, and I saw how other women who read it, how it helped them out, and reading a book of that nature. And in her book, she has some testimonies in there from other women and stuff like that. But the story of how all that went for her was a blessing to other women. And so her and her friend, her best friend, they actually wrote a follow-up book called What's Next, of a guide to how to deal with grief after a loss. Her best friend is a counselor, and they wrote this book, and it has like the 5 stages of grief in the book, and it talks about that. And so from there, I decided maybe I should write, the male version of her book to talk about it from the man's perspective, because how often, if not ever, do we hear the man talk about how he dealt with, having a baby loss or child loss or anything of that nature. And so that's what sparked me to write the book, was her book and the reaction she got from other women. And rightfully so. Like, you're going to hear from women because, listen, you're the one carrying that child for however long it is, whether it's 14 weeks or it's 9 months. That connection is going to be a connection you have for a lifetime, because this child was literally inside of you, and then you birthed it. And for some women, they may not get a chance to birth it, but you did carry it. And so rightfully so, you hear it from women, but you don't hear it from men. And from a male perspective, there's a lot that we have been taught as men over years. I mean, even dating back into Bible times, where it's like, hey, you're a man. You're like, suck it up, keep it in, don't talk about it, deal with it. And then we get all this stuff inside of us that we don't deal with. And the next thing you know, it comes lashing out, and we don't even know why, because you never dealt with it before. You just kept everything in. And next thing you know, you're exploding on someone or a bunch of people who have nothing to do with what you're dealing with, but because you didn't deal with certain things. And so this is just a way of me to help other men to kind of talk about it, to deal with it, to heal from it, be free from it, and then move on. Now, not saying to forget, because you don't forget, but moving on and healing from it, that's a whole different story. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book.
No, and it's a good point, because it to be perfectly transparent, it's something that we dealt with as well. It was a loss of a pregnancy. And when we actually went through that experience and brought it, we mentioned it to our church community, a lot of people came out and shared that they had the same experience. And it's just something that doesn't seem like it really gets talked about a lot, but like you said, especially from the men's perspective.
Yeah. And that, likewise with us. I mean, our church community at the time we were with, my wife found out there were others. I had known of one particular that had a baby loss. There were others we didn't know about that dealt with it, and they were able to speak with her about things and to be able to communicate and help her go through her situation as she was going through, the loss of our child. And then again, from the male perspective, I didn't know, how these other men felt about it that I got to, speak to, that were dealing with it. And still, they didn't really say much. It more was about how the wife dealt with it. It wasn't really about how they dealt with it. And so when I started, writing this book, as I was writing it, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize I felt like that at that time. And it was easy to write, because as I began writing it, like, it was like the movie just played back in my head, and I was able to just recall things. And so it's just amazing how even with you guys, like, I would have never known that. You guys didn't say it. I would have never known that. And so that's the reason why I wrote the book, because I felt that it's just something that a lot of men need to be free from. Because for me personally, and I'll say this, that I dealt with a lot of, negative thoughts about it, saying like, well, what's wrong with me? What did I not do right? Am I really a man to be able to handle this? Then you try to comfort your wife, and you can't, because there's only so much we can do as human beings. And that's where Elohim comes in. He comes in to make up where we come short. But doing the best you can at that time doesn't seem enough, because you're like, man, like, I can't fix this. And as men, like we're conquerors. Like we get stuff done, we conquer. And if you can't fix that, you start questioning, man, like, am I really the man that I think I am? Or am I really the husband I thought I was? And so this book, there's a lot of questions in the book, but there's also a lot of feelings and emotions that come out of the book that a lot of us men just don't talk about and don't deal with. And if we don't, it will take us to a place where it could be either a dark place or it can be a place of where you're not really sure how to come out of it. And one thing that we need to do as men is, if we're having problems and trouble, ask for help. Ask for help.
Mm-hmm. And I'm really grateful that we're having this conversation, because I think, like, our parents' generation, even, there were women, miscarriage and stuff like that. And sometimes they didn't even tell, like, their best friends, right? It's definitely becoming more, just being transparent and just saying, like, this is what I've gone through. Because obviously, as we know, depending on when this happens in the pregnancy, people would never know. Right. So I do think that these conversations are definitely beneficial and, a good help for both, the lady and the man. But I guess, like, just breaking it down, and we'd love to hear from you, like, the practical ways of when you went through this and your wife along together. How did you, I guess, deal with your grief and your loss?
Well, for me personally, I didn't deal with it until later, because my mindset was, she's hurting right now. I need to be strong for her. And in doing that, I pretty much suppressed all of my feelings and emotions to just be there for her as best I could. And I didn't realize how much it actually hurt me until we were in church one day. And I won't tell the entire story. You got to read it in the book. But we were in church one day, and as the service is starting to move, I begin to get emotional, and it's like all of a sudden it's like somebody just hit me out of nowhere, and I just broke down and just cried like a baby. And it was then I was like, man, I didn't realize, like, how much this really hurt me until, like, that moment happened. Like, that particular moment, like, I knew, I'm like, all right, this is really worse than I thought it was. Mm-hmm. But then when that happened, I was able to literally let go of my feelings and emotions, because I was taking on her stuff too.
Right.
And I had asked Elohim, I said, look, if I could take on what she's dealing with and I just take it on so she can be better, I'm like, give it to me. And I think in that moment he was like, okay, you asked for it, here it is. And that's what it felt like. And so from there, I was able to just understand, not fully, but understand that, okay, life does happen. And whether you're a believer or not, like, life is going to happen. It's not going to be a perfect walk in the park, and everyone goes through things for a reason. And so whatever reason for us going through what we went through, you help others along who are coming after you, whatever it is that you deal with. And so these books were meant to help someone who's coming after us, or to help someone who's already dealt with it and just never actually dealt with how they felt about it, and didn't know how to go through grief, didn't know how to deal with it, without telling someone, or kept it suppressed so long. And then, and what happens is that in marriages, we don't deal with certain things. And then what happens is, when they start to fester, it starts affecting our marriage to the point to where now the relationship you once had is not there anymore. And because you don't address certain things, that can drive you apart, and I don't want to say too much about the movie, but if you ever remember the movie that Tyler Perry put out about Why Did I Get Married? And the two characters, Malik Yoba and Janet Jackson, were playing husband and wife, and they lost their child due to a car accident. But Janet Jackson, her character, she just failed to address it. Mm-hmm. She failed to address it. And because she failed to, but Malik Yoba's character did, eventually in the sequel of the movie, it drove them apart. And so that's an example, but it can drive you apart as a married couple. And the thing about it is, someone asked me before, like, how do you, keep a marriage strong and together? I'm like, the marriage should always be first, no matter what, because you were married before children came along. Now, of course, you might be married and children have been there before you got married. But the thing is that no matter what, if nothing else makes it, the marriage should. So, but that's a very key point in keeping a marriage together, and then dealing with a loss like this. Everyone's going to grieve in their own way, but the grieving process, you should never be alone in your grieving process. You should find someone or someones who you can trust. Keyword is trust, to not tell all your business and tell everybody what's going on. All right. So.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Now, in your experience, without doing too much of a spoiler, did you actually take that approach? Did you find somebody to talk to about it who could really relate on that level with you?
I didn't find someone who could relate on the level, but what happened was her father, who's a very spiritual man, he was able to have a conversation with me, even in the process of us dealing with the situation. And not to tell too much, but he didn't experience it himself, but he knew of someone who did. And he was able at the time to help me to see, why this might have happened and why I might not have really seen it at the moment. Like, it's like when someone tells you something that and you know it to be true, but you're like, I ain't trying to hear that right now. But it's true. But your feelings are like, nah, like I need this right now. I don't need that. But the thing is that you do need that. It's just that where you are right now in life is rejecting it because your feelings and emotions are taking over. And so I knew it was right what he was saying, but it just didn't feel, to me, it didn't feel right at the time because I'm dealing with all these questions. I'm dealing with all these emotions and feelings. And so I didn't necessarily find someone found me. So, and that was just, to me, being a believer, that was Elohim saying, like, I know you're not going to do this, so I'm going to help you and send somebody to you because you're not going to deal with this. So I got to send somebody that's going to help you deal with it. And it might only be him saying X, Y, and Z and leave it alone. But you're going to remember this when it's all over.
Yeah.
And if you read the book, you'll see the conversation in the book. So
awesome.
Now, I'm just trying to, again, just kind of thinking back to my experience when we were kind of dealing with everything, it was the same approach. Like, I was just focused on Tanya and just helping get through that situation. A couple days at the hospital, we had somebody helping with our kids who were at home, or 3 kids at the time. And I just remember coming home when she was asleep, all the kids were in bed and asleep. And then that was kind of when it really hit me, like what had actually just happened a couple of days earlier. And that was when I had to deal with the emotion of it. Was, this experience that you had in church, was it relatively close to this happening, or was it like farther down the road when it really hit you?
It was close. It might have been a couple of weeks later that had happened. And the thing is our church family at the time, they were surprised to see it. They weren't planning on seeing us at that moment. I think it might have been 2 at the most, 2 or 3 weeks, and we were went back, and it just but we had expressed to our leadership, at the time, we said, look, we don't want anyone to show us all the sympathy and be saying, hey, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. We're like, look, you can tell everyone what happened. Let them know that the best thing that they can do for us is just pray. Like, that's it. Because then, like, you start reliving it. People start saying, oh my goodness, and you're like, and I'm the kind of person, I'm like, if I don't know what to say, I'm not going to say anything, because I don't want to be that person that helps you relive something you don't want to relive because of however it is that you dealt with it. And so we were like, look, let's just let them know, and they can tell everyone. So then when everyone sees us, they already know, okay, we ain't got to go do X, Y, Z. And so that's how we kind of dealt with it with our church family, because, we had dealt with other situations where, people just kind of wanted to show you remorse, and then you're now on the ride back home, and now you're just kind of like, really, you know what I mean? So, and look, thankfully, so we know that you care, and we get it, but there's certain times where it's like I said, if you don't have anything, right to say, just don't say anything, and just let the prayers you have be the words you say.
Mhm. And I'm a big believer in sometimes, yes, not knowing exactly what to say, but just, even a little text message, right? Because I've had, a lot of friends too have been in that situation, just
Yeah.
thinking of you, just something like that. So if they don't want to respond, they don't need to have that awkward moment to respond. But it's just like, we're here if you need us, let us know type thing, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's like, sometimes people will say, well, nobody checked in on me, right? So it's that fine line, but I love how natural conversations come up, and in those moments can bring a lot of healing too,
Oh yeah.
right? And it doesn't even need to be so fresh, but talking, and then I'm very open, if somebody's mentioned something like, yeah, that's happened to me too, like this is how I've dealt with it. Well, I would never have expected, right? So I think it's just being like, yes, this is something that does happen in life. Share your story. You never know how that's going to be, beneficial or just, healing to somebody when we can just be open and vulnerable too, right?
Exactly. And sharing your story is important because another thing that I struggle with, and it's all like in your mind, like you have all
Mm-hmm.
these conversations in your head, and you're trying to talk yourself out of doing something, and it's like, no, like your story is your story.
Yeah.
Someone's going to be blessed by it, whether it's one person or it's a million. Someone's going to be blessed by your story. Like I don't have to have a dramatic past for it to be a blessing to somebody. It's like, look, someone needs to hear my story,
Mm-hmm.
whoever it is, or someone's. And so when I got past, trying to compare my story to someone else's, that's when I got free to be like, you know what? Someone needs to hear my story, whoever it is. And so, I mean, just imagine from a biblical perspective, like all the stories you read about, if they were never written, like what would we have to go off of?
Right.
So tell your story, whether in a book or a movie, in conversation, whatever. Tell your story. It's important to somebody. And it's also important to you because that becomes to a degree that is part of your legacy. Telling your story. Who better tell your story than you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, once you've gone and passed from this life, people will have things to tell your story, and they'll have scraps and photos or whatever. But who better to tell your story than you? You know you better than anybody else. Tell your story.
100%. All right. I kind of want to distill what we've talked about so far. So I'm going to ask maybe a challenging question here. I want you to think back to when you found out that you were losing a child or that you had lost a child. If you were able to go back in time and have a conversation with yourself, then what knowledge would you share to help prepare for that?
That's a very good question. A very good question. Thinking back to when I found out, I was very quiet, very calm, and I didn't really say much. I just kind of sat there and took it all in. And to be honest, I was actually more upset with the doctor than anybody because it was like real nonchalant and like uncaring. And I understand because when you're in that field, you can't really get too emotionally involved. Like you have to just go and do your job. And I get it. But if I could go back and tell myself that, knowing it was coming, I would tell myself, the first thing you need to do is pray. And that might be the extremely hard thing to do because we always say, oh, you should always pray. And it's like, look, at this point in time, praying to me is not an option. If you are being real out there are times where you're like, I ain't thinking about prayer right now. I'm thinking about what's going on in the situation. I'm trying to figure out how to get it done. But if I were to tell myself then to say, hey, this is coming down the line, when this happens, the first thing you need to do is pray. Because when you get to a point in life where you don't know what to do and you start guessing what to do, then you start making more mistakes. Because now you're trying to go off what you think you should do and not what you actually should be doing. And who better to tell you what to do than the Most High? I mean, he has all the answers. Now, of course, again, we're human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do things that we shouldn't do things that we think is best to do. And it might be a good thing, but it may not be the right thing to do. And so that's what I would tell myself, because, at the point I am now in my life, I've learned not to be the enforcer in my family or in my marriage. It's kind of like, look, I'll say what I know needs to be said. Then I'm like, all right, Elohim, you take care of the rest. I said what I need to say. I'm like, if anything's going to happen, it's going to be you doing what it is you normally do to make things happen. And so I used to want to be, or try to be, the enforcer. And so, and being more in tune with him helped me to say, hey, look, you don't have to do that. Just do what I'm telling you to do, and then I'll handle the rest. And so I would say prayer. As religious as that sounds to be, I'm like, that's just how it is, And at that time, I wasn't thinking about it. That's the last thing I was thinking about doing. But that was the first thing I probably should have done, And a situation down the line may come again, and I'm probably not going to do that. I'm probably not, but I'll be able to have a better sense of how to handle it, because I've kind of been in that arena before.
Right. So. Won't take as long.
Exactly.
to recognize
a more rapid turnaround than before.
Oh man. This is definitely been a really great conversation, even as the only lady, obviously. But I know that it is a very important conversation. And I really hope, the ears that are supposed to hear it or watch, our eyes are supposed to see it, will see and hear this conversation and, find some comfort, find some, practical ways to deal with, grief and loss.
Amen.
Now, for anybody who wants to follow up, anybody who wants to follow what you're doing, what are the best ways to connect with you?
So the best ways are, of course, through my website at Tsombawi.com. If you're getting the video of this, you can see it down here. But if you're not, that's TSOMBAWI.com. You can connect with me there. You can see everything that I do, from a business perspective. You can also get the book there as well. The book will be there. So you can basically get the book on the website. And there's two things you can do now with the book. So it's Letting Go of Baby 2. You can the book right now is in pre-order phase. So you can pre-order the book right now from the website. And then the release date is it was on July 14th. We pushed it back to July 20th. So July 20th is when the book will release. And when the book releases, then your copy will come right to you as soon as, wherever you live at, it'll get sent to you. The Kindle version won't be available until the actual date of the release. So if you want to get the Kindle version, you have to wait until actually July 20th to get that. But the actual physical book, you can pre-order that right now from Tsombawi.com. And if you want to get the series if you want to get my book, my wife's book, and the grief book, you can also get that from the website as well. I got it backwards. There you go. You can also get that. So you can get my book, my wife's book, and the What's Next, a guide to grief after the loss on there. You can get the series. You get all three books at the same time. You can read them however you want. We're not telling you got to read them in order. You can read them how you like, individually, in groups, have group sessions or whatever. Or if you want to invite us to come, we can come as well. And however, then again, on social media, I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and on LinkedIn. So my Facebook and Twitter is the same. It's at TK Billionaire, or you can just type my name in. I'm the only Tsombawi on Facebook. I'm the only Tsombawi on social media ever, period. Just me. My father is not on there. My son's not there yet. So it's just me.
You got a little bit longer.
It's at TK.billionaire on Instagram as well, or by my name. Then on LinkedIn, just type my name in. I will come up. I am the only Tsombawi on LinkedIn. If anyone else is claiming to have that name, they are lying to you. Period. Well, they stole my identity or something. So yeah, that's how they can get in contact with me anywhere, or Messenger. It's best to just email me or contact me on social media. I'm not the super busy guy that I'm going to be, but when that changes and I start getting that busy, you'll just have to wait until I get back to you. But right now, I respond. And the thing about being an entrepreneur is that you have your days kind of set out. You have times where you're going to do things. I'm going to answer calls here. I'm going to, check my voicemails. I'm going to answer emails. So, just understand that if I don't get back to you right away, it's okay. I'll get back to you, so, but thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you, Brian and Tanya, and the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. I enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to staying connected with you guys, and just maybe we can do it again sometime again soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you so much for coming on. And for everyone who's been listening or watching this conversation, thank you for letting us disrupt your everyday.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.